And so when we see in this Gospel of John, the guards come and try to arrest Jesus in the garden. And they say, who's Jesus? And Jesus turns around and says, I am he. And they all fall down backwards because of his glory and his greatness. Just in those 3 words, they get knocked down. See, a lot of times we're used to the Jesus that kind of looks like the wild-haired hippie or, the son of the Pope or whatever. But Jesus is God himself. Jesus is presented in John as the pre-existent creator of the world. And if he's the creator of the world, he can overcome the world that he has created. John shows that Jesus is the Son of God by focusing on these signs that Jesus performs, these miracles that Jesus performs. And so we see Jesus turn water into wine. I kind of like that. I like the water and the wine part. Maybe I want to rewrite it and say water into Guinness because, I like to drink some Guinness. Anybody like Guinness? Yeah. Okay. Just loosen up here. Come on now. The point is, it's not about the wine, changing the water to wine, but it's about Jesus showing his glory or who he really is. And so he makes a blind man see. He makes a lame man walk. He raises Lazarus from the dead. And then ultimately, as the ultimate sign of his glory, he rises from the dead himself. And so Jesus is the resurrection is the ultimate sign that Jesus is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And so by the end of the time that you read the Gospel of John, John says later on in chapter 20, he says, these things are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. John, as he shows us that Jesus is the Son of God, he also shows us that Jesus is God in the flesh. He's close to us. He knows what we've been through, what we're going through. See, a lot of times we also think of Jesus as this just guy in the clouds and all white, or a little baby kind of floating around the crib. Turning little bugs into toys, rattles or something. But John shows not only the deity of Jesus, he shows the humanity of Jesus and how Jesus is intimate with the people that he's around, the people that he loves. Jesus expresses emotions and tears. He gets upset at the religious leaders and drives them out in anger. See, a lot of times we think as Christians, we're not supposed to be angry. I get angry sometimes. I used to think that to be a Christian, I had to be nice all the time. When something made me angry, I was just supposed to go, yeah, it's okay. It's all right. That's okay. But sometimes everything is not okay. And Jesus shows us this. And then Jesus weeps. He shows tears at the death of his friend Lazarus. John shows us the humanity of Jesus. He reveals secrets to his disciples in the upper room. He says, hey guys, I'm going to die. I'm going to be crucified, and then I'm going to rise up from the grave. And after I rise up from the grave, I'm going to give you my spirit. And then he shows them their destiny in God, that they're going to be overwhelmed with persecution and trials and struggles. I don't know about you, but a lot of times we portray Christianity as just this Pleasantville experience where as soon as you say, hey, yeah, I believe that Jesus is Lord and I just want to follow him, you just get painted on with that smile. You know how Forrest Gump had that shirt and it turned into, have a nice day? Sometimes Christianity, following Jesus, is not have a nice day. It's going through something. It's being overwhelmed. And John portrays Jesus' intimacy by painting himself. He writes in there about this disciple whom Jesus loved. The disciple that sits next to Jesus at the table. In other words, John is trying to say that I'm Jesus' favorite. A lot of times, that's what I want to believe about myself, that I'm Jesus' favorite. I don't know about you. I don't know if you're Jesus' favorite, but I'm Jesus' favorite. What we don't realize is that being favored by God, being Jesus' favorite, is not always fun and games. It's not always something to rejoice about. John was persecuted. He saw the beheading of his own brother before his eyes. He was thrown, imagine this, he was thrown in a pot of boiling oil and then sent to exile on the island of Patmos, never to see his friends and loved ones again. The favorite of Jesus is overwhelmed. And so John knew the reality of life. That sometimes we do have to go through some things. Sometimes we do, as followers of Jesus, get overwhelmed. And so he shows us after Jesus has died and after he rose from the grave, the disciples are locked up. The doors are shut and tightly closed in the room because they're overwhelmed. And a lot of times in your life, you could be shut up, isolated by the problems that you face, shut up by the loss of a job, shut up by arguments with your spouse, shut up by arguments with your family, overwhelmed. The disciples were overwhelmed. They were overwhelmed by the issues in their life. See, back then, Israel, the land that they lived in, was under Roman occupation. And so for a Jew at that time, for the land to be under Roman occupation, they thought of it as defiled. There was just a sickness in the air. Things are just not right. How many people drive around or walk around and live life and you know that something's just not right? Sometimes I drive and I look at billboards with a lot of just near X-rated stuff and I go, something's just not right. I look on the TV and I see the destruction in the world, the murder and the violence, and I know that something is just not right. And because of this Roman occupation, the Jews were taxed heavily. And sometimes, I know right now it's after tax season. I feel like I've been taxed heavily, but that's another story. But sometimes you could be spiritually taxed heavily. Sometimes you could be emotionally taxed heavily.